I've been sitting here in my office for the last 12 hours, staring at a set of data that, honestly, I thought I would never see in my lifetime. I want you to pause for a moment and look at the headline that just flashed across every Bloomberg terminal in the world. At 8:34 a.m. this morning, the White House released a statement that will likely be studied by historians for the next 100 years as the exact moment the American era in North America began to fragment. President Trump sent a formal trade proposal to Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. Washington described this as a generous compromise, an olive branch intended to stop the bleeding. But once I read the full text, I realized it wasn't an olive branch at all. It was a golden cage. Trump demanded $500 billion from Canada. He didn't want it paid out over a standard decade-long trade cycle. He wanted balance of trade restitution immediately. He took to Truth Social and presented this demand not as a negotiation, but as an invoice. He treated Canada, our largest trading partner, our closest ally, and the co-guarantor of our airspace, like a neighbor who's been skimming off the top of the rent for 30 years. But here is the fatal mistake Washington made. They sent that demand to a man who does not panic. Mark Carney is not a typical career politician. I have followed his career from Goldman Sachs to the Bank of Canada to the Bank of England. This is a man who thinks in basis points, systemic risk, and long-term strategic destruction. When Carney stood at that podium in Ottawa just 4 hours later, I saw the clinical precision of a surgeon. He looked directly into the camera, held up the American proposal, and said 5 words that shook the foundations of the State Department. This proposal is not serious. Tonight, I am going to walk you through the wreckage of this strategy. I am going to show you how Washington's attempt to bully the North didn't just fail. It backfired so spectacularly that it has left the United States strategically isolated on its own continent. If you think this is just another trade spat, you are fundamentally missing the shift in the global balance of power. Let's look at the fine print of what Trump actually proposed, because I want you to understand the sheer level of arrogance involved. The White House offered to remove 75% of tariffs on Canadian goods. They promised to restore the intelligence sharing that was cut off weeks ago, and they committed to maintaining NORAD. But I want you to think about the logic here. Why would Canada accept a 75% removal of tariffs that are already deemed illegal by every international trade body? If someone breaks into your house, steals 10 of your most valuable items, and then offers to give back 7 if you sign a 10-year loyalty oath, do you call that a generous compromise? No. You call it a hostage situation. And then there's the $14.7 billion in damages. Canada has already calculated the specific economic harm caused by Washington's illegal trade barriers. The U.S. proposal didn't just lowball that figure, it ignored it entirely. Washington's message was, let's just move forward and forget about the money we owe you. As a financial analyst, I can tell you, that isn't diplomacy, that is fantasy accounting. But the real poison pill, the one that I believe triggered Carney's immediate rejection, was the demand for stable and predictable export policies to ensure U.S. energy security. In the language of grand strategy, do you know what that actually means? It means Washington wanted a contractual right to dictate Canada's energy policy. They wanted to turn Canada into a captive gas station. They wanted Ottawa to guarantee that the lights stay on in Chicago and Detroit at a discounted rate, while preventing Canada from selling those same resources to a hungry market in Asia or Europe for a higher profit. Trump's team thought they could play the tough guy, and that the freeloaders would fold. But they sent that ultimatum to a man who understands the math better than anyone in the White House. Carney didn't just see a proposal. He saw an attempt to dismantle Canadian sovereignty. And, as I'm about to show you, his response was designed to do maximum damage to the American heartland. At 12:17 p.m., Mark Carney stood at a podium in Ottawa. He didn't shout. He didn't tweet. He was as calm as a man reading a weather report. But the words he used were a declaration of independence. In 6 minutes, Carney methodically dismantled every single pillar of the Trump offer. He made it clear that partial compliance is not compliance. He looked at the camera and said, "The United States is our partner, not our landlord. Canada does not pay tribute." That single line landed in Washington like a precision-guided cruise missile. Within minutes, it was the top trending clip in London, Tokyo, and Brussels. Why? Because the world was waiting for someone to finally say no to the invoice-style diplomacy of the current administration. Carney laid out 5 non-negotiable requirements. He didn't ask for a meeting. He didn't ask for a re-evaluation. He stated the terms: total and unconditional removal of all tariffs, a legally binding commitment to defense cooperation, signed by the President himself, a formal retraction of all threats against Canadian territory, the full payment of the $14.7 billion in damages, a formal recognition of Canada's absolute sovereignty over its own natural resources. And then, he did the most powerful thing a negotiator can do. He placed the document on the podium, turned around, and walked away. No questions, no follow-ups. I want you to understand the psychological impact of that move. For decades, Canada has been the polite neighbor who always looks for a compromise. By walking away, Carney signaled that the era of Canadian politeness is dead. He was telling Washington, "The clock is ticking. You have 10 days. Don't call me until you're ready to sign." At that moment, the White House was caught completely off guard. They expected a counteroffer. They got a door slammed in their face. And as the markets began to open, the true cost of that mistake became visible. This is the part that I need every American watching this to listen to very closely. There is an arrogant assumption in Washington that we hold all the cards because we have the larger economy. But I'm here to tell you that Canada is currently holding a nuclear option over the U.S. economy, and they just put their hand on the lever. Most people don't realize that Canada supplies more energy to the United States than Saudi Arabia and the entire OPEC coalition combined. 60% of our crude oil imports flow south from Alberta. The natural gas that heats homes in the Midwest? Canadian. The diesel that fuels the trucks in Wisconsin? Canadian. When Carney said, "Canada will ensure its resources serve its national interest first," he was letting every energy trader on the planet know that the U.S. discount is over. Within 90 minutes of that statement, West Texas Intermediate crude jumped $6 a barrel. Natural gas futures spiked. Energy stocks in Toronto surged, while their American counterparts started to wobble. Why is this so dangerous? Because U.S. refineries, specifically in the Midwest, were built and calibrated to process Canadian heavy crude. You cannot just swap it out for oil from Texas or the Middle East. It would take billions of dollars and years of re-engineering to change those plants. I want you to think about the irony here. Trump wanted to isolate Canada to protect American interests. But within hours, he managed to isolate the American energy consumer. He has handed Mark Carney the power to hike gas prices in every swing state in the Union with a single administrative order. This is the strategic miscalculation I've been warning about. In a fight between brute force and precision, precision wins. Carney didn't threaten to cut off the oil. He just reminded the world that he could, and the market did the rest of the work for him. While the White House was throwing punches at Ottawa, the rest of the world was picking up the phone. This is where I think Carney's background as a global financier really paid off. Within 3 hours of his press conference, the President of the European Commission was on the phone with him. The UK Prime Minister's office issued a statement expressing deep concern over American unilateralism. Japan, traditionally one of our quietest allies, issued a pointed reminder about multilateral principles. Do you see what happened here? Carney used Trump's overreach as a recruitment tool. He has built a 4-0 nation coalition that sees Canada as the victim and the U.S. as a rogue actor that no longer respects international contracts. While Washington was trying to isolate Canada, it ended up isolating itself. For the first time in the post-war era, the special relationship between the U.S. and the UK, and the security ties between the U.S. and Japan, are being tested by a common neighbor. I ask you, if you are a global investor, where do you put your money? Do you put it in a country that issues invoices to its allies based on a Saturday morning social media post? Or do you put it in a country that stands its ground on the rule of law and controls the most vital energy supply on the continent? The answer is written in the currency markets. The Canadian dollar gained 1.3% against the greenback today. That is a vote of no confidence in Washington's leadership. The smart money is moving north, and I think they're going to stay there for a long time. 17, 19. But the pressure isn't just coming from outside. At 4:15 p.m. today, I saw something that should be a massive wake-up call for the White House. Congressional leaders, including prominent Republicans, released a joint statement. They didn't back the president's ultimatum. They actually backed Carney's rejection. They called the president's proposal insufficient and urged him to stop wasting time. Why would they do this? Because Carney's retaliation wasn't a broad, blunt instrument. It was surgical. He didn't just tax American goods. He targeted bourbon from Kentucky Mitch McConnell's backyard. He targeted agricultural equipment from Iowa. He targeted tech components from Texas. Carney isn't fighting the U.S. economy. He is fighting the Republican caucus. He is making it impossibly, painfully expensive for GOP senators to stay quiet. When you have 3 Republican senators in 24 hours calling for dialogue, that is political code for, Mr. President, you are killing our donors and our districts. Surrender now. I've covered Washington for a long time, and I've never seen an ally pick apart a president's domestic coalition with this much ease. Carney is playing chess with a spreadsheet, while the White House is playing checkers with a smartphone. And as of right now, the king is in check. So, where does this leave us? We are now in the final 10 days. March 18th is the deadline. I see 2 possible paths forward, and you need to be prepared for both. Scenario 1 is emergency capitulation. Trump faces a collapsing bond market and a revolt from his own party. By March 15th, the White House realizes that an energy war with Canada is a war they cannot win without destroying the American heartland. They accept all 5 of Carney's requirements. Canada wins the greatest geopolitical victory in its history, and American credibility is permanently scarred. Scenario 2 is the full-blown crisis. Ego wins. Trump refuses to back down. March 18th arrives, and Carney activate Phase 2. At midnight, the oil stops. The natural gas stops. Canada formally withdraws from the USMCA, and NORAD is dissolved. Within 1 week, the U.S. economy enters a state of paralysis. Gas prices double. Rolling blackouts hit 15 states. Congress moves to override the president's authority just to keep the lights on. I want you to think about that. We are watching 2 men play chicken with the largest trade relationship in human history. One of them is screaming and swerving. The other one has both hands on the wheel and a stack of economic data on the passenger seat. The $500 billion question is on the table, and the answer just changed the world. I am watching the tickers. I am watching the pipelines, and I will be here to update you the second the next shoe drops. Make sure you are subscribed and have that notification bell on, because this story is moving faster than anything we've seen in decades. Don't blink. I'm your analyst, and I'll see you in the next update.